Today's second feature was a documentary that I have been meaning to watch for a while. It's on Filmstruck's LGBTQ theme that is expiring December 1st, and it's been up since June, and I have failed to watch most of the movies on it, or the ones that I hadn't already seen. So I'm furiously catching up on them. And today's film that I caught up on was a an amazing documentary from 1977 called Word is Out, Stories of Some of Our Lives. And it was directed by six people known as the Mariposa Film Group. It's Peter Adair, Nancy Adair, Andrew Brown, Rob Epstein, Lucy Massie Phenix, and Veronica Selver. Um, Obviously, Rob Epstein, probably best known now for The Times of Harvey Milk. He also did Howl, which I have not seen yet, but we also have on Filmstruck, so I need to catch that one. Um, this film was released in 1977. It took several years for these filmmakers to put together, and it was restored for its 30th anniversary by UCLA and Outfest. And that restoration was paid for by David Bonet, or the David Bonet Foundation. I recently, and by recently I mean 5 minutes ago, just read that he made all his money by founding GeoCities, and that makes me so happy because I love GeoCities, and I built my first several websites using GeoCities. The thing about GeoCities is it was created with these templates so that you didn't have to do HTML, but I didn't like any of the templates, so I learned HTML in order to make it kind of take the templates and tweak them. So thank you for that. And also thank you for restoring this documentary because, oh my God, it was so good. So they interviewed over the 5 years that they made this film over 200 people and wound up editing it down to, I think it was 26 uh, interviews that made the final cut of this film. It's in three sort of sections about coming out, about not coming out, but coming to terms of who you are, what it was like to grow up, and then where they're at now in the 70s. And it was a nice mixture of lesbians and gay men, and of various ages, various races, and various relationship statuses, and it's just wonderful. I don't know if I've ever seen anything quite like it. It's seamlessly edited, these interviews where they just sort of all flow together, and you learn so much about what it was to be gay in the 70s and also in the 40s and 50s and 60s from these oral histories. And it really shows how important oral histories really are for history in general. It had its premiere at the Castro Theater, my favorite movie theater in the entire world. If you ever visit, go sit in seat M107 and you'll be in my presence because I left part of myself there when I moved away from the Bay Area almost 5 years ago. What else did I have to say about this? I think it's fascinating to watch this movie 40 years later for several reasons. One, to see how far we've come. Two, to see how far we still have to go and how some of the things that they bring up, I'm like, shit, we're still having to explain this shit to people 40 goddamn years later. And two, that it's important to see that this is 1977 when this came out. This is an American film, but in terms of gay rights, you have England just decriminalizing homosexual gay men in 1967. Then you have marriage equality, not even marriage equality, sort of looking for, like survival benefits and things. That's not until 25 years later. So you're this, and then you hadn't even gotten into the AIDS crisis yet. And so you're at this part in queer history where there's less, but you also are in post Harvey Milk. So you're in this place where there is visibility, not a lot of visibility, but some visibility. There's still demonization, but there's no, there's very little representation, and but there's more, but there is more freedom, and there's less, not terror is not the word I'm for, less like people are less scared because it's not, we're not in the midst of the AIDS crisis. And by people, I mean both homosexual people and heterosexual people, because everyone was terrified. Um, and there's less sadness, and you're coming out of disco, and you're coming out of glam rock, and you're coming out of all these eras, and the free love of the 60s, and you're in a post Vietnam, and you're in this interesting sort of place, and a perfect place for a film like this to come out. I'd be really interested to see a similar film made now, talking with people who came of age in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and and even young people like myself, and where we're at now, where, you know, a lot of these people were talking about not ever knowing a gay person or not having the language to define themselves. And we're still having people in this country that go through the same thing. Like I myself grew up knowing what gay meant, knowing what lesbian meant, but still not quite understanding what bisexual meant, having never heard the word pansexual, and having feelings that I couldn't define because I grew up in a place where there were, as far as I knew, the only gay couple were the couple who owned the flower nursery, and you weren't really supposed to talk to them. You weren't. I mean, you talked to them, and you weren't going to be like, "Hey, tell me about what it's like to be gay." Like that wasn't where I grew up. That's not how you behaved, and that's not what you brought up. And I didn't have the language to discuss what I was feeling, and so I felt like I didn't talk. I didn't think about what I felt. I just tried to get through it. And then even when I moved to the Bay Area, I still didn't quite understand um, what I had gone through and what I had experienced and what I felt. And I came of age post AIDS crisis, post all of this. You know, like the first marriage licenses were being issued in San Francisco by Gavin Newsom when I was in high school, and yet I still didn't have that language. And so to think that um, there were these people talking about this 40 years ago, and that we still have blind spots, and we still have places where um, visibility is still so low, is kind of shocking. I think it must be much better now with the proliferation of the internet and social networking, because that was still sort of a baby thing when I was a kid, and I didn't really know what to like. I mostly just found Facebook groups, not Facebook groups. Facebook didn't exist till I was in college. Um, Yahoo groups, GeoCities. I didn't really find Yahoo groups for anything except film, because that was the only language that I really understood and could connect to people with. Um, I don't know. I just think this is a fascinating film, and I loved it, and I'm so grateful for this restoration, and that it's on Filmstruck, so I can watch it. And I'm just glad that these people put their lives out for others to discover and to say, "Hey, me too. I understand this. I feel this. I went through this." And if it weren't for these pioneers sharing their stories and what they went through, we wouldn't be as far as we are now. Even though we still have so much further to go. Um, So this was the first major film by queer filmmakers about queer people, and it actually played on PBS in various places, which I think is just fantastic. And I'm sure this was, for a lot of people, a guidepost, both in terms of discovering who they were, but also for straight people to be like, oh, they're just like us. Unfortunately, there's many people in the queer community who still have to convince others that we're just like them, and or even if we're not just like them, we're equal to them in terms of our rights as human beings, and that's endlessly frustrating. But baby steps, I guess. This is a beautiful film, and you should totally watch it. And if you don't have Filmstruck, you can get it on DVD from Milestone Films. And either way, you should watch it because it is so good. Um, one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. And again, the directors were Peter Adair, Nancy Adair, Andrew Brown, Rob Epstein, Lucy Massie Phenix, and Veronica Selver. Word is Out, Stories of Some of Our Lives. It's from 1977, and it is amazing.